Hey, I thank you for tuning in, and I want to thank you also for allowing me to be a part of your journey with Jesus and to encourage you in your walk with Him. I was reading through the book of James. And sometimes James is a little bit hard to understand because it seems like it conflicts with some of the things that Paul wrote. But James is one of the first epistles that are written. And I read this verse here, verse number 2-4. He says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." Well, I don't know what your initial response to trials or tribulations are, but I don't know if my first response is to count it all joy. But James, in a time of great persecution for the early church, tells the believers, he says, count it joy. And you say, well, why joy? Well, remember that joy is very different than happiness. We may not be happy about our difficulties, our trials, our tribulations, our sufferings, persecution. We might not be happy about that because happiness is based all upon our circumstances. But he says, count it joy. Well, joy is that inner peace and serenity of knowing that we are in the perfect hand of God. That these trials and tribulations, these persecutions, the rejection we might be going through is not apart from the working of God. And so we count it joy that we know that all of who we are is in the hands of the one who calls us beloved. And we know that the various trials and tribulations that we go through are going to be used for our good. Paul said that he works all things together for good to them who love him and are called according to his purpose. That's us, the children of God. And so we realize that these various trials come, and he says they're the testings of our faith. Because when we have these trials, we're tempted to think, well, God's abandoned me. He's left me alone, and I'm all on my own, and I got to solve this problem. But he says, no, just the opposite. Because the testings of our faith don't come into our life so that God discovers something about us. The testings of our faith are all there for us to know what we know. You see, why does a teacher give a test? Well, teachers don't give tests to students to punish the students, however tempting that might be to think. The teacher gives the test so the student, and maybe the teacher, can discover what the student already knows. And he says, in these trials and tribulations, we learn this. We learn steadfastness. We discover when we face trials and tribulations, we discover the insufficiency of our own self-sufficiency, and we discover the sufficiency of Christ. So the test of our faith produces steadfastness. Without times of trial and tribulation and hardship, when everything was easy and going just like we had it all planned, we wouldn't realize our utter helplessness and our dependence upon our loving God. And so he permits and allows these things to come into our life for our good. There are many times when I just feel helpless. I don't have an answer to the problem. I can't change the circumstances. But then I remember, I am the beloved of the God who is in perfect control. And when I find him to be my sufficiency, my faith is perfected. When we say we have faith, it means we entrust ourselves to. It doesn't mean we never have doubts. It doesn't mean we don't have questions. It doesn't mean we force ourselves to believe something we're not sure about. Faith is simply my receptivity to God's activity. That he has begun a good work in me and he will finish it. He's begun a good work in you and he will finish it. And that faith is what produces the steadfastness that allows us to stand in adversity, that allows us to trust when it doesn't make human sense. That's when it has its full effect. That we enter into completeness, perfection, lacking in nothing. Now, what does that mean? It means that God is everything. That in Christ I am complete. And he's more than I will ever need. If I'm trusting in myself, I will find myself often in great distress because I don't have the answers, the solutions. But when I'm trusting in him, the sovereign ruler of the universe, who has called me his friend, I find myself standing firm in the fight. And so too will you. God never promised us a life without trials, without tribulations. He promised that he will never leave us nor forsake us. He lives in us and he makes us complete. And when we don't have the answers, we remember we can't do anything, but in him we have everything. So just remind yourself, as God's beloved child, you have him living in you. He is the source, the answer for everything. And though all things that happen in our life are not good, nor do they make us happy, we can find joy, a peaceful contentment in knowing that he is using all these things for our good, to bring about our transformation. Well, let that settle deep in your heart. Remind yourself that you are his beloved child. And the hurts and pains and trials of this life are not without purpose. He's using them for your good and your transformation. I love you, and I hope you have a great day.